Tonight on Let It Rip.
We've never seen anything like this before, but we will come back, and we will come back strong.
A strong red wave was predicted, but instead many Republican candidates were handed defeat, many of them with the endorsement of former President Trump. What the GOP needs to do next, with or without Trump. And in Michigan, a blue wave as Democrats take control of Lansing. The political climate changed literally overnight. But first,
when the unofficial results are finalized, they will reflect that this election was the highest turnout midterm election in Michigan's history.
High on turnout and voter integrity. Entering her second term, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson fending off her former opponent's allegations about voter integrity while quelling concern after former President Trump urged protests in Michigan on Election Day. Why she says there's no question about the accuracy of Tuesday's vote. She's sitting down one-on-one with Fox 2. And so welcome to Let It Rip. Joining us now is the Secretary of State herself, Jocelyn Benson. It's good to see you. First of all, congratulations on your win. I know that was a hard-fought win for you.
Yeah, I'm really gratified to have the support of so many voters all across the state from both sides of the aisle, independents as well, and really gratified but also energized to go to work for everyone.
So let's talk about the election itself. There was talk before the election happened that, or I should say there was worry that perhaps we would see somewhat of a repeat of people questioning the results almost right away. We saw Tudor Dixon actually tweet that she called and congratulated the governor at sometime like 9 a.m. the next day. What was your reaction when you saw that?
I mean, I got choked up a little because it was really such a validation that we had truly run a successful election if the unsuccessful candidates recognized that so soon, in fact, after the unofficial results were known. And so it was a real validation for all of us who worked so hard to ensure a smooth election. And, I was grateful for the civility and the leadership that showed for someone who formally, denied election results in 2020 to accept these when indeed her own campaign came up short. It really showed that maybe we've turned a bit of a corner and can move towards more normal civility in politics again. I certainly hope so.
Well, there's civility and there's decency on one hand, and then there's others out there, and we don't want to name call here, but those who believe in some of these conspiracies and think that perhaps things are not being done fairly. One of those people is the woman who ran against you, Christina Caramo. She's yet to concede the election. Does that concern you? I'm
not surprised. I'm disappointed because certainly other candidates have acknowledged the truth of the election results. But again, these are folks who, my opponent, my former opponent in particular, tried to undermine the elections, did not stand by former election results either, and certainly, consistently showed us what type of person she would be in this office. So I'm grateful that the voters have elected me for another 4 years. I'm eager to get back to work and, build partnerships with those who will work with me and be committed to telling the truth and respecting democracy, even if, not everyone, including my former opponent, chooses that path.
In her non-concession letter that you released to the media, Caramo goes on to talk about problems that she says happened at the polls. She points out in Ann Arbor that she believes that people were allowed to vote after the fact that they shouldn't have. That's not necessarily true. You're saying not true at all. In fact, you're saying that the people who were in line that we saw at 10 o'clock, what were they doing? Just to give people an idea.
Anyone who shows up by 8 p.m., which is when the polls close under Michigan law, is able to vote. And so, these are folks who showed up by 8 p.m. And indeed in Ann Arbor and in East Lansing, a large number, hundreds of students chose to register and vote on Election Day, which is their right. We want to encourage them to plan ahead, maybe next time. But it certainly is their right to do so. And it's our responsibility to make sure if they show up by 8 p.m. that they can exercise their right to register and vote on Election Day. And that's what the hardworking clerks and election officials in Ann Arbor and East Lansing did through the night for hours. And kudos also not just to those officials, but the students who waited for hours because they had showed up by 8 p.m. and knew they were entitled to be able to vote.
But the optics of it, for those who do believe in those conspiracies, they thought, hey, these people are being allowed to vote after 8. But you're saying, no, these are people who were registered and just waiting to go do their thing.
Yeah, they're, under the law, they have a right to vote as long as they show up by 8 p.m. and they did.
I want to get to the work that lies ahead in just a moment, but one last thing about the opponents, if you will, for a moment. You tweeted out during the campaign to former President Trump's message, where he had said that there was some irregularity that had happened in Detroit. He kind of caught wind of that and went ahead and put on his Truth Social that it's time to protest, protest, protest. You didn't want those flames to be fanned. What did you do?
Well, I simply said it's not true. and please stop lying to foment political unrest in our state or anywhere, because we've got to move past that. We've got to come back together and solve problems for everyone and that benefit everyone, as opposed to continuing to try to build up this drama. And really, in this case, what was happening was the former president exploiting what was a very run-of-the-mill, harmless issue in Detroit that was solved quite quickly, where ballots had the same numbers. That was fixed to give them different numbers. Everyone voted once, and everyone who was eligible to vote was able to vote. So it was a problem that was solved quickly, and then unfortunately exploited by former politicians, to try to further a political agenda.
But so that allegation that he had put out there and others had put out there that when they got to the polls, they were told that, hey, you're already voting absentee, that was cleared up pretty quickly, you're saying? Yeah,
it was inaccurate. They had not voted absentee, and that is what was cleared up quite quickly. And then it was simply just, again, a number error in the e-poll books, and we worked to correct that also to the media so that you all can understand what was happening. But of course, the former president seized on it, as others did. But as we saw in 2020, when there's no actual evidence of wrongdoing and when the allegations are false, they usually can gather some steam, but not enough to actually impact anything. And that's also what happened here. We didn't see anyone protest, which I was very gratified for. We saw people simply, again, recognizing, oh, this actually wasn't a big deal, continuing to vote and continuing to ensure a smooth election.
But that speaks volumes about where we're at now compared to where we were a few years ago, when you had the same person tweeting out things and people reacting to it. And now it seems as though here in Michigan, people said, wait a minute, there's no reason to protest. Moving forward, when you look at what happened at TCF with the poll watchers, kind of lift the curtain for us and give us an idea as to the bipartisan effort that was put into place to make sure that what happened a couple years ago didn't happen again.
Well, there were a lot of new preparations put in place, protocols and security parameters for that space, and also really working to ensure that people who wanted to be a part of the process and sincerely observe or ensure the law was being followed were able to do so. We saw more Republican poll workers than ever before, more people involved in the process overseeing it, and we simply just said, and welcome, we want you to be poll workers, we just don't want you to disrupt the process. And if anyone tries to intimidate voters or another way undermine our processes, then we're going to have a problem, then we're going to have people removed. And everyone, for the most part, respected the process, so we were able to ensure transparency and security and efficiency, and people were able to get results much sooner than we'd anticipated.
Lessons learned moving forward. Absentee voting, we saw record numbers, close to 2 million, I believe. When you take a look at those numbers, is there something that needs to change or happen in order to even make this more efficient? What do you think about that as the Secretary of State?
Well, certainly more pre-processing time for those millions of absentee ballots is important. With this newly elected legislature, I'm optimistic we can get some changes, but voters also enacted early voting, 9 days of early voting, which is essentially turning your ballot in early and it gets processed and counted right then and there. So we're going to be moving towards a much more efficient process, even though we're already well on our way of having a very accessible and secure election process. And I'm confident that by 2024 we'll be even more prepared for any storm that may come our way, and our voters will have even more options to vote.
You talked about working with this Democratic legislature in Lansing. What are some of the things that you need in order to do your job more efficiently?
The same things we've always needed, which is essentially one, a steady stream of funding, investing in our elections, increased security protections for our elections and the people who run them, and also ensuring that military spouses can return their ballots on time electronically, like military service members that they're married to can do, and also finally pre-processing, working to ensure we have the 7 days of pre-processing, that it's funded, and that clerks around the state have time to prepare, implement it in advance of the next round of elections.
For people concerned about the proposal that talked about voting rights and IDs and all of that, and of course the military being able to vote, there's a section in there that talks about allowing people to vote if they don't have an ID in that particular moment. And there has to be an affidavit that's signed later. But could you clear that up for anyone who out there who's concerned about that?
Yeah, I think it's important we identify every voter before they get a ballot. And we either identify folks with a photo ID, which we want everyone to be able to have, or if they don't have it, a signature, which can also identify yourself just the way when you sign a check. That signature verifies your identity. So the signature check is something that we use to verify someone's identity if they don't have a photo ID. But one of the things, so that'll be in place under the new provision. And then at the same time, I want to work with returning citizens and others to make sure everyone gets proper identification, because that's something that, for many reasons in society, is a benefit to have.
Well, Secretary of State Benson, it's good to see you as always. And I think one of your campaign ads had a Republican gentleman on saying, hey, look, you know, this is about getting things right. And that person believed in you. Apparently, many of the voters also believed in you to move forward. And so any last message that you have for the voters who did vote for you and more importantly, perhaps those who didn't vote for you?
Yeah, I'm grateful to everyone. And I consider myself a Secretary of State with a responsibility to serve everyone, to make our branch offices work for everyone, voting work for everyone. And I want to spend a lot of my second term sitting down with folks who have been misled about our election security so we can restore and ensure they have rightly placed faith in the process as well.
Transparency is key, and that's one of the reasons we have you on the show right now. Jocelyn Benson, Secretary of State, newly reelected. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
When we come back here on Let It Rip, we're going to be talking to Congresswoman Debbie Dingell and also Rocky Rechkowski with the Oakland County GOP about what happens next with both the Democratic and the Republican Party. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Let It Rip. Months of political ads are over, and now the results are in, of course, as you know, for the most part across the country. The Republican candidates in Michigan, though, with a few exceptions, trying to figure out what happened after major losses. They're feeling blue after the blue wave came crashing into the state. So how to move forward? Joining us now is Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, who just won re-election in her new district, and Oakland County Chair of the GOP, Rocky Rechkowski, and the man who was in the lines at the polls in Detroit, our anchor and attorney, Charlie Langton. Good to see all of you here today. Thank you for joining us. I want to begin with a tweet that Tudor Dixon earlier put out there at about 6:30 on November 22nd, saying, it's easy to come out and point fingers now, but the truth is the GOP here in Michigan fought against me every step of the way and put the entire ticket at risk. We need fresh leadership at the Michigan GOP or Republicans will never have a voice in Michigan. This after Ron Weiser, Michon Maddock, and Paul Cortez all basically put out a memo addressing why it was that so many lost here in Michigan. What's going on with this party right now in Michigan, Rocky? Is it in complete disarray?
No, it's not. First off, Ron Weiser is the chair, Michon Maddock is the co-chair, and Paul Cortez is the chief of staff of the Republican Party. You know, we lost. We lost fair and square in an election. I just saw a recent poll and some exit polling that showed that 211,000 Republicans that normally vote in gubernatorial elections didn't come out to vote. They just didn't feel that they were excited enough about our candidates. And also, we had candidates that got into the race, and when they won their general elections, the money was there to define them before they could define themselves.
But Rocky, the woman who ran for the top spot in the state of Michigan, Tudor Dixon, is saying this party didn't have my back and now they're pointing the finger at us. And she's basically saying this is shame on them. Is there any truth to what Tudor Dixon is saying?
There may be, and there's a lot of finger pointing, but you know what we need to do? Just like the Democrats did in 2016, when I heard so many Democrats say, oh, I'm going to move to Canada, or oh, this is so bad. You know, we're having that same Maalox moment, right? We've got to introspectively look inside and say, wait a minute, in this red wave midterm, where did we go wrong?
I don't think it was a red wave. Sorry.
It was not a red wave.
No, it was a lukewarm pink at best.
It was a pink mist, and in Michigan, it was a complete blue tidal wave.
Yeah.
And listen, as in Oakland County, we focused our efforts on school board races, on the local races, and we won 31 out of 35 races because we focused on them. We had the money, the funding, and we helped our candidates. The parties are supposed to be there, the state party is supposed to be there to help those statewide candidates. And I think that there was a disconnect there.
Really, the elephant in the room is Donald Trump here. I mean, the top three Republicans were endorsed by Donald Trump, but the money didn't follow. And we have to agree that the election started 45 days before November's election. And the Republicans did not get into the game, Debbie Dingell, until a couple of weeks before. This was a no-brainer.
Wait a minute, you're asking her to tell you about
Republican policy? No, but I even want to tell you something. The campaigns don't start 45 days before. 2024 is on. It's already here. Yeah. So, I mean, that's the fact of the matter. But I would also, I said on one of the cable shows on Monday that I predicted that we had razor-thin races across the country, that we were not going to see a red wave, that it could go either way. But I think there were three issues that people voted on. Choice in this state was clearly on the ballot, and that was one issue. But it wasn't the only issue, and anybody who only talked about that made a mistake. It was the economy, but I think democracy became part of people's decisions in the last couple of weeks. I actually think it was far tighter a couple of weeks ago. You know me, I'm on the ground, I work it, I listen to people. And I think people are tired of the partisan bickering. They're tired of the vitriolicness.
Well,
they're tired of fear and hatred and the political violence.
Congresswoman, they were also tired of deniers, and we know that now because so many people went to the polls and said this was a legitimate election. Republicans who lost, including Matt DePerno and Tudor Dixon, said we lost fair and square. They didn't like it, but they said they lost. Your reaction when you saw Tudor Dixon tweet the next morning, hey, guess what, Governor Whitmer, I want to call you. She called, she congratulated her. Is decency and civility restored just by that one act, you think?
I think she significantly contributed to it, and I thank her. Because I think right now there is a group of people that are intentional, and by the way, it's been documented that Russia is trying to help fund some of those groups that are intentionally pitted people against each other.
Absolutely.
And I think the fact that more people have to do it, because I think there's a group of people trying to undermine people's confidence in the outcome.
Were you surprised by Tudor Dixon? Were you surprised that Tudor Dixon accepted it?
I thank her for doing it.
But were you surprised, though?
I didn't know what. I honestly, I try to believe in the good of people, and you know how I am. I reach across the aisle, and I left the governor. I have to admit that I didn't stay until she did we knew she had won. Fox was, just for the record, the first network that predicted she was going to win. And she didn't, I mean, we talked about would she.
Yeah, but you know what? It also brings up not just civility. Civility also comes down to who's funding these campaigns and how much money is thrown into these campaigns. When you're looking about almost $100 million being spent on the gubernatorial and the top 3 races in Michigan, we've got to seriously talk about getting money out of politics. Let's go to public funding, because you're never going to have an even playing field, and the one who has the money 94% of the time wins the election.
Rocky, I want to bring this train back to the Trump factor because it's important. And we know that, of course, this morning, Rupert Murdoch's very own, as you know, New York Post posted a big editorial cartoon on the cover of their thing calling him Trumpty Dumpty. And the New York Post published that. The Wall Street Journal then comes out and says, Trump is destroying the Republican Party from the inside out. Is there any truth to that?
There may be a little bit of truth, but let me go back to, it's not about President Trump. It's about the candidates we put and support in the primaries. People need to do their homework.
But they were endorsed by Trump, though, Rocky. These candidates were endorsed by Trump.
Yeah, but they have the same amount of ability to run as everybody else. If Trump has that much influence over the Republican Party, then he's going to win the next primary.
Well, he did. He
did, because people followed his endorsement instead of doing their own homework.
Were these the wrong candidates?
I'm an America First candidate. I'm a conservative, and I get along with Debbie. But I would say that we need to look at fresh faces in 2024. We need to look at Ron DeSantis, Mike Pompeo. We need to look at leaders that have an ability to have 2 terms, not 1 term in office. And a lot of people that I hear from all the time in Oakland County saying that, listen, we love his policies, and I loved his policies, but we don't like the rhetoric.
So can you say right now that Trump should not run? I'm saying
that he has the ability to run. If he wants to run, he can run. But I'm telling you right now that I think a majority of people, like myself in Oakland County, want fresh new faces of conservatives. Listen, in the 60s, and I wasn't even born, you guys had the Goldwater era. When I mentioned you guys, sorry, Rube. But Goldwater won. He was an arch conservative. Sure. He lost hard. Everybody lost. And what did that do? That gave a new reawakening to the Republican Party with someone called Ronald Reagan. Governor DeSantis could be that next Ronald Reagan.
Well, Congresswoman, I got to ask you, because you're in Washington every other day, I feel like, and you're there, and your boots on.
Not for a while. I've been home.
Well, I know you've been home for now, but you're connected. And when you talk to people on the ground there, the Republicans that you talk to, do you think they're surprised by how quickly the Trump train is turning around?
I don't know that it has. I think it's been very interesting to watch these last couple of days. It is not clear who's going to control the House. It's very tight, razor thin.
We think McCarthy, Speaker.
But I'm not sure that he can win. I mean, if the Republicans do take control, and there are about 25 seats that are still at play, and whoever has it, it's going to be 5 seats. I mean, it's going to be a very tight majority. Right now, Kevin McCarthy doesn't have the votes to be for Speaker. He's got his group, his Freedom Caucus. He's got members saying they're not going to vote for him. I'm sure Marjorie Taylor Greene is. I haven't talked to her. I'm not the expert on Marjorie Taylor Greene, but she's probably one of them. I hope that everybody's going to take a deep breath. The Paul Pelosi, incident should make us all take a deep breath and be worried about how we are normalizing political
Do you think
violence.
it did? Do you think it had people take a breath on the right and say, what's going on here?
I got to tell you that I think what Antifa and BLM did in 2020, what happened on January 6th, what happened to Paul Pelosi, and all across the board, we should have been taking a deep breath a long, long time ago. And where both parties, leaders from both parties say violence is unacceptable. What Antifa and BLM did was unacceptable.
I did then too, as you know.
Oh, everyone's right. Yeah. But I think I have a feeling, though, that I think Democrats are going to be pushing for Trump. I think that there's Trump's going to run. There's no doubt about it. And I think
Democrats
are going to
in the primaries.
And we have a primary in Michigan where if Biden's the nominee or there's no contest on the Democratic side, we can cross and the Democrats can vote in the Republican primary for Trump, at least in Michigan. And because the Democrats will win against Trump.
So
they want Trump.
I think
and
she's
she's laughing.
suggesting a closed
she
primary.
Knows it. She knows it.
I'm not
you want
saying
a closed primary?
anything. Republicans
She
should.
knows it.
No, but Charlie, do you want a closed primary? Because I'll support a closed primary. But remember what that
Democrats
means.
won't.
No, because it costs money. If you close a primary, who's going to pay for it? Are the parties going to pay for it? And who has the money? Right now,
But you
the party of the rich is the Democrat Party.
But let's talk about what needs to happen for the GOP survival. First of all, I have to get back to Tudor Dixon's tweet. When you listen to the Michigan GOP coming out and basically categorically explaining away why it was that all the candidates who lost.
I think too quick, too, by the way.
Well, it was literally.
I'm loving every minute of watching.
I know you are.
But you know what? January's down around the corner.
But my question to you is, what needs to happen for this GOP here in Michigan to find its soul, find its root, find its ethos again?
I think the ethos is there. The party platform is there. What we need to do is we need to stop looking at an individual to tell us how to vote. We need to do our homework. I remember when I was a kid having my parents take me to Democratic functions, and then later I grew into my own way and became a Republican with my parents, and we went to Republican functions and we saw the Pat Robertson, George W. Bush fights, and the Jack Kemp and Bob Dole. We're going to return back to that, but we need a younger, fresher face, and I think DeSantis may be it.
I want to talk about the long lines that we saw in Ann Arbor for a moment.
Oh, sure.
We had Jocelyn Benson, the Secretary of State, on just earlier, of course, tonight, and she said basically every single one of those people who was in line, it was close to 10:30 at night. Christina Caramo, the person who ran
10:30 at night? They finished voting in
11:52,
Ann Arbor.
right?
When we looked at, you're right, we looked at the live shot at 10:30, there were still people in line.
There. It was long
but it was
after.
long after. But the bottom line is this: the optics are everything. This is a time in which people want to feel like there's integrity for the elections. Jocelyn Benson said every one of those people was properly registered and there was no foul play there. But the optics of it, Christina Caramo is saying, how come those people are still in line? What do you tell people, your fellow Republicans who have doubts about the election when they see lines like that?
Well, wait a minute. People passed Proposal 2, and now they're going to learn that this is going to be the wave of the future. Because the
last minute voting.
Yeah, the last minute voting. We now enshrined into our Constitution that if you don't have your ID, you can sign a piece of paper and potentially even lie on an affidavit. We also enshrined into our Constitution that people can register and vote at the last minute on the day of the election.
But Congresswoman, shouldn't people have the right? Shouldn't people have the right
shouldn't be the law.
to be able to go at the last minute to vote if they do it the right way?
And they did it the
law?
right way. They showed their ID. That was all validity. And I talked to those kids. I was on that campus off and on all day, and I was there late into the night to thank them. They knew that their vote counted. What I do want to do is to make sure we look at why we have those long lines, why we didn't have the machinery that we needed. How do we have more staff there? And we need to look at that across.
We have a lot to look at. We're going to look at that. We have to take a break
this.
because we have final thoughts when we return. We'll be right back.